Good day everyone, I am Miss Portes. I am going to discuss about Lesson 5, Communicative Strategies. But before that, let us recall your previous lesson. In Lesson 4, Communicative Competence, you were able to learn about the three aspects of communication, which are structural aspect, lexical aspect, and social-cultural aspect, where you learned what to say, when to say, and how to say words and sentences properly. Learning these will help you become a competent speaker of the English language. Our lesson for today is another tool that you can use to be an effective communicator. In this lesson, we will learn about the following: topic management strategies, communication support strategies, verbal communication, and nonverbal communication. What is communicative strategy? Well, let us first define the word strategy. According to the Webster Dictionary, a strategy is a plan of action or policy to achieve a major or overall aim. In communication, remember that our aim is to have an effective sharing of information. Communicative strategies are planned ways to help us solve conflicts in communication, reduce misunderstanding, and avoid communication breakdowns. Now let's talk about topic management strategies. These are plans, ways, or means of sharing information which are adopted to achieve a particular social, political, psychological, or linguistic purposes. These strategies are mostly used whenever you are talking to a group of people, during discussion, or public speaking. Under topic management, we have 7 strategies, which are nomination, restriction, turn-taking, topic control, topic shifting, repair, and termination. Nomination. Nominating a topic allows the listeners or audience to tune in to the topic, recall background information, and prepares the listeners to what is to be said about the topic. Good topic nomination prevents communication breakdown. There are several forms or expressions that can be used for topic nomination. Example, let's talk about. I would like to talk about. Today, I am going to discuss or talk about. Restriction. A speaker must restrict the topic of discussion to make it specific enough to be manageable. This restriction is determined and limited by the amount of time given to a speaker. Since the time is limited, the speaker must make it clear to the audience where he or she restricts the discussion. A topic must be restricted so that it can be properly discussed, resulting in better communication. Turn-taking. During a discussion, involves changing from one speaker to another in a way that does not disrupt the communication process. In proper turn-taking, speakers must know when to take their turn or to allow others to speak. This means one speaker should not take too much time in speaking. To do this, participants need to be sensitive to the signals that show when they can speak. Topic control means the speaker should focus on the topic without straying into other discussion. The speaker must not allow any incidental mention of other topics from taking attention away from what he or she is talking about. The speaker must not give extended illustrations that are too long, such that the audience or listeners forget its connection to the topic. Topic shifting. When changing from one topic to another, the speaker should prepare the audience or listeners for the change. The change must be done smoothly by using known expressions that signal a change of topic. This strategy affects the message. Some listeners who are not ready for the shift in topic may develop different reactions, such as a feeling that the speaker has not fully discussed the topic. Topic shifting as a shift in communicative strategy may also affect the relationship of the speaker. A shift from a topic to which listeners are interested in to one in which the listeners are not may cause listeners to become uninterested in both the message and the speaker. On the other hand, when the topic shifts from one in which the listeners are not interested in to one in which they are, the listeners may develop a more positive attitude towards the speaker and the message. Several forms that can be used when shifting topic include "Let us now turn to the issue" or "topic off." I will now talk about, in addition to current topic, there is also the next topic. Repair. Sometimes a speaker is misunderstood by the audience or listeners. In this case, the speaker must clarify what he or she is saying. Particular attention must be given to the piece of utterance that produced misunderstanding. The speaker must repair this miscommunication by rephrasing or using other words that express the meaning better to his or her listeners. Several forms that can be used to signal repair are the following. I mean. What I mean is. Let me rephrase that. In other words, let me say that again. Termination. Any speech or discussion must be terminated properly. Without doing so, the listeners or participant would be left wondering what happened to the discussion and will not understand whether the topic was fully discussed or not. One way to terminate a speech or discussion is to restate the main idea of the speech in a way that is memorable to the listeners. Another is to give a summary of the discussion. Sometimes, the speaker uses familiar forms that signal termination of the speech or discussion. Examples of forms used to terminate a discussion or a speech are, "Let me end by saying," "In conclusion," "In summary," "We were able to discuss." Now let's talk about communication support strategies. A breakdown in communication is always possible in any interaction. However, we can minimize communication breakdown by using communication support strategies. This includes asking for clarifications, repetition, rephrasing, using nonverbal language, and building on what others have said. Asking for clarification. This is probably the most common way of preventing a breakdown in communication. Whenever possible, we ask people we talk with or anyone giving a lecture or speech to clarify what they are trying to express if we think we do not understand them. We must take note that there are different ways of asking for clarifications based on the formality of the situation, differences in ranks between the listener and the speaker, and the level of intimacy between the speaker and the listeners. Repetition. A speaker may repeat what he or she said if he or she feels that the listeners did not understand fully what was said. A speaker may also repeat an utterance to make sure that the listeners do not misunderstand it. Repetition is a very useful way of preventing a communication breakdown. However, too much repetition can irritate listeners. Because of this, a speaker must balance between using repetition and other ways of preventing communication breakdown. Rephrasing. This involves repeating the same message using different words or expressions. Listeners, especially ones who are not very good in the language spoken, may not be familiar with a certain word, phrase, or expression. One particular element that may need rephrasing is an idiom. When speaker uses an idiom, less proficient listeners may not understand it. For this reason, the speaker may need to rephrase the idiom using more literal wordings. Using nonverbal language. This is another very common way of preventing communication breakdown. This strategy is used particularly when at least one of the participants is not proficient in the language. It can also be employed when the spoken utterance are difficult to perceive, as when the speaking is in a noisy environment, when the speaker has difficulty in speaking, or when the listener has difficulty in listening. Using nonverbal language is possible only when the speaker and the listener can see each other. Building on what others have said, during a discussion, a speaker can express his or her ideas well by using the words, phrases, or ideas that have been previously stated by other participants in the discussion. In this way, the speaker is capitalizing on what others have already given. Also, building on what others have said creates a connection between the speaker and the listeners, because the speaker affirms what others have already spoken, giving them a sense of importance. In building on what others have said, however, it must be made clear that the speaker and the previous speaker in a discussion have the same meaning for words, phrases, or ideas that were stated. Now we are going to discuss about verbal communication and its elements. Verbal communication is communication using words or utterances. Elements of verbal communication includes pause, loudness or softness, rhythm, repetition and rephrasing, tone, and appropriate form of language. Pause. A speaker takes pauses between utterances in order to allow the listeners to process what the speaker has spoken. A speaker may pause for longer than usual after an important utterance in order to produce emphasis by waiting for the utterance to sink in among his listeners. A pause can also be a speaker's signal to the audience that he or she is waiting for some indication from the listeners as to whether or not they understood what was spoken. This is true if the speaker thinks what was uttered was something that may be difficult to hear, comprehend, or accept. Loudness or softness. Depending on the speaker's style, emphasis can be achieved by either speaking loudly or softly. An active speaker knows when to raise or lower his or her voice. In some cultures, speaking loud is appropriate in emphasizing a point. However, the opposite is true in other cultures. Speaking softly shows that the speaker is emphasizing a point. In addition, other emotions can be expressed using the loudness or softness of voice. For example, using a soft voice can be a speaker's way of showing that what is being expressed is something of intimacy or heartfelt. Rhythm. The way a speaker talks can be a powerful tool to engage listeners. Rhythm refers to the speed and flow of a speaker's utterances. A good rhythm catches and holds listeners' attention. On the other hand, sing-song tone or a manner of speaking involving alterating, raising, and lowering of pitch can indicate that the speaker is trying to entertain his or her listeners or try to arouse a particular emotion. The rhythm employed by a speaker must be appropriate to the content of his or her message as well as the context in which the speaker delivers a speech or participates in a discussion. For example, a sing-song rhythm is not acceptable in academic discussion because academic discussion is intended to be devoid of emotion. Repetition and rephrasing. Unlike reading, a listener cannot go back to what a speaker has spoken if the listener did not understand that particular utterance. A As part of the speaker's effort to help the listeners understand, the speaker will do well to repeat his or her utterances, especially if the content of the utterance is difficult to understand. Another way to foster understanding a complex or difficult idea is to rephrase what has been said. For this purpose, the expressions "in other words" or "that is" are very useful. Tone. Tone of voice is essential in communicating effectively. The tone of the voice often shows the attitude of the speaker towards the topic or the listeners. Listeners certainly do not appreciate an insolent or impolite tone. The tone of voice must be matched with other elements of the communication situation, including the relationship between the communication participants, the topic, degree of formality, and the emotions associated with the situation or topic. The tone of voice is determined by the culture to which the participants belong. Appropriate form of language. A speaker must use the appropriate form of language in a given setting. The technical term for the form of language used is called register. There are different registers in any given language, depending on the formality of the communication setting, participants, topic, and other factors. For example, there are different registers for speaking in a showbiz talk show, funeral, academic forum, casual conversation, and others. A speaker must know which register to use and the elements of that register when speaking to a specific audience. Let us now discuss nonverbal communication. Nonverbal communication involves expressing oneself without the use of words. Because of its nature, nonverbal communication is more prone to misinterpretation than verbal communication. This is especially true when there is a difference between the culture of the speaker and the listeners. It is also possible that the speaker might unintentionally communicate something nonverbally. Understanding cultural associations to nonverbal elements of communication is crucial in preventing a breakdown in communication. We will now discuss some of the elements of nonverbal communication. Elements of nonverbal communication includes gesture, eye contact, posture, facial expression, and proxemics. Gesture. Gesture plays an important role in communication. They can help express a speaker's point better. For instance, when a speaker describes something as being tall, the speaker may raise his or her hand to add emphasis to what is being spoken. When a speaker wishes to show what he or she feels strongly about what is being said, the speaker may show a clenched fist. In addition, a speaker may use hand gestures to try to visualize the physical appearance of what he or she is describing. Wide arm gestures may send a message that the speaker is discussing broad or general topics, while hand and arm gestures closer to the body may send a message that the speaker is giving precise details. Folding one's arms together can send a different message ranging from relaxation, apathy, or even auditiveness, especially when complemented with other nonverbal actions. A speaker must be aware of gestures that are not acceptable, particularly when speaking in a cross-cultural context. For example, a speaker is waving an outstretched index finger may seem to scolding the audience. The speaker must be aware of the cultural idea an audience may associate with gestures. To sum it up, a speaker must take extra care in his or her gestures and must be sensitive enough to the reaction of his or her audience to the way he or she executes them. Eye contact. When a speaker maintains eye contact with his or her listeners, he or she gives the impression of being serious about what is being discussed. Lack of eye contact on the part of the speaker can mean several things. It could mean that the speaker is unsure of what to say or that he or she does not clearly remember what to say. Worse, it could give the impression that he is just inventing things to say to his listeners. In addition, the culture of the audience may also dictate the eye contact practiced by the speaker. Eye contact is a crucial element of nonverbal communication. Posture. Good posture is beneficial not only for health reasons, but also for relating to others when speaking. In some cultures, there are postures that are unacceptable because they seem to be too relaxed when the setting calls for seriousness. In general, standing with an erect body and head makes for good posture and is applicable in most settings. A sitting posture may be acceptable if the speaker has authority over the audience or is at an age in which standing for some time is tiring. Facial expression. A speaker's facial expression must match the topic of discussion. For instance, when the topic is something serious, the speaker must also maintain a grim facial expression. For discussing academic topics, a speaker may have a pleasant or smiling facial expression, only to the extent that it does not distract the listeners. In informal or non-academic situations, smiling, laughing, and other facial expressions can help develop a rapport with an audience. The amount and extent of facial expression depends on how academic, informal, or dramatic the speech situation is. A more personal, informal, or dramatic speech situation calls for a more intense use of facial expression than in academic speech situation. Proxemics. Speakers must make use of the space around them properly. The use of space in communication is called proxemics. One indication of distance is the closeness of the speaker to his or her listeners. A distance of 3 arms length is used between people who do not know each other well. A distance of 2 arms length is used between people who have known each other for some time. A distance of 1 arm's length is used between people who are close to each other. A distance shorter than 1 arm's length is used between people who are very close to each other. In addition, any large object such as a table between speaker and listener gives the feeling of distant relation. It may show authority on the part of either one of them. Now, let us summarize the things that we have discussed in our lesson. Remember, there are many communication strategies employed by different speakers and even by listeners. However, only nomination, restriction, turn-taking, topic control, topic shifting, repair, and termination were discussed in this lesson. These strategies, which can be collectively described as topic management strategies, are considered to be very important in ensuring smooth interaction between speakers and listeners. A breakdown in communication is always possible in any interaction. However, we can minimize communication breakdown by employing several strategies. This includes asking for clarification, repetition, rephrasing, using nonverbal language, and building on what others have said. These strategies can be collectively described as communication support strategies. In order to communicate properly, speakers must not only communicate using words, but also with their actions. Their words and actions must match. Otherwise, miscommunication can occur. Communication using words is also called verbal communication, while communication without words is called nonverbal communication. Remember that the elements in verbal communication are pause, loudness or softness, rhythm, repetition and rephrasing, tone, and appropriate form of language. Nonverbal communication includes gestures, facial expressions, posture, eye contact, and proxemics. The meaning given to these actions are culturally determined. That is, they may vary from culture to culture. And that is the end of our lesson for today with Lesson 5, Communication Strategies. I hope you learned something and thank you for watching. If you have any concerns or questions, please consult your subject teachers.
Happy learning at home with lessons made easy by Olivarian GoTeach. One proud Olivarian.